Hello and welcome to Maiden, Matriarch with me, Louise Perry. My guest this week is Justin Brierley. Still audio only just for the time being, but I do have an announcement coming shortly about the future of the podcast, so stay tuned. But audio only for the time being. Justin is a writer, a broadcaster, and the author of a new book, The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God, Why New Atheism Grew Old and Secular Thinkers Are Considering Christianity Again. We spoke about the rise and fall of New Atheism, why New Atheism hasn't turned out quite as well as many of its proponents hope for, the role of religion in politics, and in the extended version, we also spoke about the relationship between New Atheism and other religions, particularly Islam. That extended version of the podcast is available at louiseperry.substack.com, where you can also find bonus episodes and the MMM chat community. Enjoy. So, Justin, for anyone listening who was too young or not paying attention at the time, how would you characterize the New Atheism movement? What do we mean when we say New Atheism?
Well, it's old atheism, but with a bit of a new gloss, in as much as it was far more in your face. It was a very kind of media savvy form of atheism. It was, in a sense, it rode the wave of the internet, and it enabled lots of disparate groups to get together and feel like they were a collective movement for a good while. And it was just a lot more dogmatic in tone, I think, than previous forms of atheism had been, fronted essentially by four characters who came to be dubbed the Horsemen of New Atheism: Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett. And each of them in their way had a best-selling anti-God, anti-religion book. And for a while, there was this mini publishing boom in, atheist anti-God literature, which was completely new in a way, but, was there for a while. And I guess it kind of all culminated as well in the fact that there was an increased sort of sense of animosity towards forms of fundamentalist religion, especially in the wake of 9/11. And in a way, you saw the closest thing you had ever had to atheist advertising campaigns. In London, we had the so-called atheist bus campaign. There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. In the US, they had the Reason Rally, which was a kind of gathering of tens of thousands of people on the mall in Washington, DC, to champion science and reason. So it just had this energy to it, which came to be called the New Atheism, and probably began around the mid 2000s, and I would argue had a shelf life to about maybe 2016, 17, something like that.
I was a teenager during that period, and teenagers obviously do tend towards atheist feeling generally. Or well, I think teenagers tend to be contrarian, so whatever happens to be, flavor of the month, teenagers are likely to adopt. And I loved the God delusion. I remember the atheist bus thing in London. Francis Spufford has such a beautiful section in his book Unbelievable on the atheist bus.
Yes,
I'm sure you've read it.
Yes, though his book is actually unapologetic, and it's
sorry, I forget.
It's fine. There's lots of unsomething books out there of some form or other, but it was an interesting moment. I mean, I was not a teenager when the New Atheism came around, but I could see its appeal to teenagers. I think it did embody that contrarian spirit that you spoke of, and the atheist bus campaign. In a funny way, I found it quite enlivening. I say at the beginning of my book that, if you wanted to kind of tell people to forget about God, well, you hardly needed to say it to the UK. Very few people were taking God seriously to start with. It was a bit like sort of asking a teenager if they would fancy a lie-in on a Saturday morning. It hardly needed to be said. Yet by putting the question, onto bus posters, it kind of stirred up the whole debate, and there were some Christians who were happy to support it because they thought it was a great way of raising questions. So I think it was a bit of a gift in the end, actually, that bus campaign, as much as it was done to kind of, do God down. I think it did God a favor in a way.
It strikes me now as being quite of taking a slightly archaic view of Christianity as well, because I think what we were encouraged to think with the stop, so there's probably no God, stop worrying about it and enjoy your life, right, is to basically stop worrying about hellfire. And it doesn't seem to me as though hellfire is front and center of most sort of mainstream Christianity in Britain nowadays. But that was I guess that was the
Yeah.
promise of atheism, that you
Yeah.
didn't have to worry about such things anymore.
I think that was definitely, and it was in a way responding, I think, to the kind of Christian bus campaigns that had, threatened hellfire to people who did not believe. But as you say, I mean, to some extent, I think most people rolled their eyes at that form of Christianity in the UK by the time that campaign happened, and most people's experience of Christianity, well, in the UK at least, was probably just dimly remembered Sunday school lessons and fusty old churches with dank smelling pews and things like that. It didn't represent this terrible, threatening enemy of reason and science that it was often painted as. I think the new atheism to that extent was more actually driven by concerns around religion and so on in the US, because there was
Hmm.
a bit more of a kind of sense that some people were worried that creationism was being taught in classrooms, and that the religious right had more of a hold on power and that sort of thing. It did always feel like a slightly odd sort of movement in the UK, if I'm honest, because we hadn't for a long time had a Christian majority, so it didn't feel like there was some dreadful thing around the corner that we needed to be afraid of. But yeah, I appreciate what you say. It's a kind of, it felt a little bit like it was swinging for something that wasn't quite there in the end.
Thank you so much for watching that episode of Maiden, Mother, Matriarch, and for all of your support. It means an enormous amount for the growth of the show. If you want to hear bonus content, an extra 20, 30 minutes of conversation with the guest, maybe a little bit more personal, a little bit less filtered, then you can go to my Substack at louiseperry.substack.com, where you can sign up for extended episodes and also bonus episodes. And you can also access our chat community. You can also support the show by subscribing on YouTube or subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts is also really great for encouraging other people to give the show a try. Please also spread the word, tell people that you know who you think might like it to give it a shot. The word of mouth effect is really valuable, so we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, watching, and supporting what we're doing.